Okay, here we are back to English, lunchtime. We really appreciate that you are still in the room with us. This session is about something very special because every time we talk about hydrogen, we tend to think about mobility and these kind of things. We just forget that today hydrogen in the world is a $120 billion business as an industrial molecule, right, in industrial processes. And one of these processes where we can use hydrogen and where we certainly use more and more hydrogen is the steel industry. And in order to talk about that, I am very pleased to host here Dr. Rizwan Janjua, who works for the Steel Association, the Worldwide Steel Association. Please, Rizwan, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Rizwan Janjua. I am head of technology at World Steel Association. World Steel Association is one of the largest industry associations in the world. We represent the global steel industry, and our membership accounts for roughly 85% of the global steel production. And our members are present in every continent and almost every country. And as you probably know, the global steel industry produces around roughly 1.85 billion tons of steel. So steel is always around us. I mean, if you just look around, almost everywhere you look, you will find something made out of steel. So this is one of the most important building materials for us.
Yeah, and so it's one of the most difficult sector to tackle in terms of decarbonization. So the subject that I think there are two parts in the subject. The first one is that today that industry is already using some hydrogen, which is a gray one. Not green hydrogen. So we may think, first of all, of decarbonizing that. But there is another subject that is an emerging one, which is about innovation in the process in order to produce steel with different techniques that are based on hydrogen, notably steel reduction. So I would like you, first of all, to tell us what are the current way of using hydrogen in the steel industry and what we can do next with that molecule, the magic molecule.
As you rightly highlighted, that the steel industry is innovating, trying to find ways of using hydrogen. And because we don't have enough green hydrogen at the moment, so in order to develop the technologies, we are using the gray hydrogen. So when we get that technology perfected to an industrial scale, hopefully by that time we will have sufficient supply of green hydrogen that we can use in the industrial processes. So right now we use quite a lot of carbon. So we are a carbon-based process. So in order to move away from carbon, we are using more and more hydrogen. And as you know that iron ore, when we find it, we extract it from the Earth's core. It is available as ferrous oxide. So iron is bounded with oxygen. So in order to take away that bit of oxygen, we either use carbon, so which we emit as carbon dioxide, or using hydrogen, which will result into just water vapor. So that is the technology that many of the steel makers around the world, they are trying to work with. So we see examples in Sweden under the hybrid program that has been led by SSAB. Along with some energy companies and some research institutes, we see other examples in Austria being done by voestalpine. ArcelorMittal, for example, is doing another pilot in Hamburg. So there are more and more examples that we see that steel industry is trying to find ways of decarbonizing itself. And that is with a vision to meet the climate change targets that are outlined in the vision of 2050.
Are there many new techniques that the researchers are working on, or is this more or less clear for every steel producer, the way that hydrogen could be used in the process in different ways? Are we still in a stage where we are trying to understand how we can do it, or are we close to a deployment phase?
You know, when it comes to use of hydrogen, we talk about massive scales in the steel industry. Normally, you see plants which are in the economic scale, roughly 2 million tons a year steel production. So mostly steel, when you see that coming out, we use very large processes, let's say blast furnaces. So in order to use hydrogen at such a large scale, we need to be very careful in the process development, because hydrogen is a very difficult energy source to work with. So it comes down to the chemistry, how you absorb hydrogen into the very small fine particles. So this is where we start talking about using pellets in steel making. So we have to have very large surface to volume ratio. So this is why we use pellets, which is roughly the size of a garden pea. So this is where we use hydrogen. So it reacts with the oxygen and then releases as water vapor. So this is more or less the scale that we will be able to see when the whole process is available at an industrial scale, that plants of roughly 2 million tons of steel capacity.
So the challenge is not the new process itself, it's really how to scale up that at the size of a producer for 2 million tons.
That's right. So if you ask my opinion, I think we are more advanced in terms of process development than the supply of green hydrogen. So the bottleneck that I see going down 20, 30 years down the line will be the supply of hydrogen, not the technology development.
Okay, so the supply chain is at stake.
That is the bottleneck.
Okay, and how do you foresee that? Do you see the steel producer as on-site producer of green hydrogen, thanks to electrolysis, for example? Or do you see rather something where you would have big transport pipes carrying hydrogen from production sites elsewhere and going to the production site?
I think going forward, the partnerships are going to become of prime importance. I mean, right now, the steel producers who are trying to develop those processes, they are working in very close partnership with the energy companies. And because the Mother Nature has not blessed everybody with the same resources, the sun does not shine everywhere the same way, and the wind doesn't blow everywhere the same way. So probably going forward, we will see more centralized production and distribution of hydrogen, because everybody wants access to the hydrogen, so it might be more economical and logistically easier to have centralized hydrogen production and then distributing it to whoever needs it.
Mm-hmm. The economics is everywhere here, because you absolutely need to stay competitive, decarbonizing but staying competitive. So you need a massive amount of hydrogen at the lowest cost possible, okay?
Yeah.
But at the same time, as a production site, you are what we call electricity intensive. So you could benefit from exemptions of the transport tax by being a producer on site with electrolyzers in order to have the scale effect. Then your problem is more the electricity that you're getting rather than the hydrogen through pipes. So it's a way to master the economics.
This is one way of going forward, and I think you're right in that sense that when we do the feasibility studies, it is said that the electrolyzer you have got on site, it should be over capacity. So that can act as a buffer. So let's say
Okay.
if you install an electrolyzer which is 30% more than the capacity that you can use, it can act as a buffer, and that hydrogen, for example, can be used elsewhere when you are not producing steel. So that will be kind of a way of buffering, or, for example, a load bearing for the electric grid.
I have absolutely no clue about the number of sites in the world that are producing hydrogen, steel. Do you have the figures in mind, roughly? What are we talking about, actually?
I mean, from small to large, there's over 600 sites, I would say, between 600 to 700 sites across the globe. And again, the steel is produced by mainly two routes. One of them is the iron ore route, where we use iron ore and then make steel. And recycling constitutes a very big portion of steel production. Steel is roughly 97% of the products are recyclable. So the steel scrap, for example, is a very big, important constituent of iron and steel making. So 30% of the steel globally is produced by the secondary sources. That is when we collect scrap and remelt it. And it is much more energy efficient because all the impurities are already gone. You just need to remelt and reshape it. So depending on how the 2050 landscape looks like, you might be familiar with the IEA energy report that they have published recently, the steel technology roadmap. According to their forecast, the landscape is going to shift dramatically, where we are going to produce more steel by using electricity and hydrogen by 2050 than the primary route. So we are going to require a large amount of hydrogen, and they forecast that around 16% of the steel will be produced through green hydrogen.
Have you done already studies to, first of all, to identify whether all those potential targeted sites would be connected to existing pipes, gas pipes, in order to see whether some of those gas pipes could be converted to transport hydrogen to the site? Is this something that you have already in sort of mapping of that, or it's a work to be done?
No, right now, our goal for the steel industry is to really perfect the process development. And again, it is not in the industry's own influence of Sophia to develop the hydrogen generation.
Sure.
So we have to work in partnership with the energy industry. And then that is the question that we need to discuss with them, that what are the most effective ways of generating hydrogen, either at the site or at a central location. And depending on the geography where we are in the world, it might be that, if the steel making location is at the steel making site is located at a geographical location where you have got access to renewable energy, you can generate it. I mean, we have got one example in the US at Evraz Steel. So they are working in partnership with another energy company. They are working purely with the solar power. So they have got an understanding with the energy company where they will produce all the energy on site, and they are going to export all of that to the energy company. And whenever they need it, they get that energy back.
In terms of economics, do you already have an idea of the price point cost that is the minimum threshold under which the process become interesting?
Yeah, the costs are quite an interesting topic. I mean, without going into the exact numbers, as I said about the IEA report, they forecast that roughly 10 to 50% of the production costs are going to go higher.
Okay.
So that is a significant increase. And of course, there is a demand for green steel, that is steel produced by using renewable energy. So we see more and more examples of automotive companies requiring steel which is being produced by using green energy, and they are willing to pay that extra premium to get that green steel. So there is another thing that we need to make everybody aware that that steel will come at a premium. So the customers, they also need to have that kind of understanding that, yeah, it's a mutual responsibility for everybody. That when we want to decarbonize industries which are very energy intensive, just like steel industry, so we need to share in the cost.
I have a tricky question. Is there a risk because of the paradigm change in terms of energy and feedstock to see some production sites deciding to leave the place they are on to go another place where we would have enough energy, renewable, hydrogen or whatever? Is this something that can happen? I know it's maybe very tricky to answer that question, but
It could happen because, as you know, that there are more and more carbon pricing mechanisms being put in place around the world, and we have seen that kind of change or shift in production bases in Europe even. So a lot of the production bases, they have moved away from Europe because of that higher carbon prices. So I think policy is one of those measures that the policymakers will have to take into account. What impact does it have on the economics? Also, as well as environment, and then what it means for the mobility of people, for the social infrastructure. So these are the questions that steel industry cannot answer really.
Well, it's where I wanted to go actually. You talk about policy, but clearly, if we want to keep the employment and the production sites where they are, we need to make sure that we will bring to that site what is required to continue with those new processes. So it's also a political and strategic a concern for the states to make sure that they have the right strategy and politics to address those big industrial usages. I'm pretty sure they are aware of that, but do you have interaction as an association, steel producer association? Do you have direct contact with the states and the decision makers in order to make sure that they put the right policies in place to go that direction?
World Steel Association acts on a global scale, and we do not have any influence or a direct dialogue with the regional policy makers or even the country level policy makers. Our regional association members, they do have got a direct contact with them, so they do enter into dialogue with those. But on a global scale, let's say we do collaborate with the International Energy Agency, with OECD. So there they have got those meetings, they do take place. So World Steel Association, whenever we have that opportunity, we do inform them. So our job is to really make sure that all those policymakers, they have got the right facts when they do make those decisions.
As an association, do you produce white papers or things like that in order to explain those new challenges?
Yes, I will just tell you that if you just type worldsteel.org on any web browser, you can have access to the media library where we have got all those different facts and which are targeted at various audiences. So if you are just a normal general public, it will inform you about very basic steelmaking facts, what are the challenges, and depending on if you are a very high-level researcher, you can have access to those reports as well, which are free for the general public.
Okay, great. We are going to wrap up and conclude here. Do you have for us sort of estimate roadmap? When do you think that this industry will achieve certain amount of objectives of decarbonization thanks to hydrogen. Do you have already identified steps and objectives, quantitatively speaking?
I mean, in terms of stages, there are ways that we need to really move. And as I said, that the clock is ticking. So those targets have already started, you know, with the Paris Agreement. So what World Steel Association is asking our members is to really use the existing technologies to the best level of their performance. So we have got an initiative, we call it Step Up, where we are trying to bring all the steel industry to the best level of the performance, that is matching everybody to the top 15% of the level of performance. So there is a huge, significant improvement that we can make in the medium and short term. And then we envisage that by the use of more and more scrap, we are also going to make a big difference, cutting down carbon emissions. And then starting 2030 onwards, that is the time when we will see much bigger changes. And hopefully by that time, the technology will be available which can be deployed on an industrial scale.
Okay, great. Rizwan, I would like to thank you very much for being our host here and to enlighten us on this very important topic. Thank you very much and enjoy the exhibition.
Thanks very much.